Well, good morning. It is so great to be with you guys this morning. I'd like to welcome everyone who's watching with us online. I want to give a special welcome to those folks at our New Bern campus, which is my home campus. And I'm super excited also for our Leland campus. They've been meeting here with us in Studio 3 over this last 18 months or so in this season of COVID, and they're finally able to get back into Belleville Elementary School. And so we're celebrating with them. Today they're having a big party there on site at Belleville outside, and so it is going to be a terrific time for them. God is moving in so many ways in our communities across Eastern North Carolina, and what a fun and exciting time it is to be a part of what he's doing right now. If you were with us last week, Mike kicked off a new series for us, and he started talking about this idea that it's something that if you've been with us for any length of time, you've probably heard us talk about: encounter, formation, and expression. Now, this is the way that you and I become who we are. And so what we said last week as Mike kicked off the series is that an encounter is an unexpected event or collision, something that happens to you. And then formation is the effect of this encounter on who you are. This is what's happening inside of you. And expression is the resulting behavior or attitude that reflects the effects of that encounter. And last week, we looked at an encounter with Nicodemus and Jesus. And he went to Jesus at nighttime, kind of under the radar, and he had a conversation. And in that conversation, Jesus invited him into a new life, into a new start, into a new way of seeing things. The term he used was to be born again or born from above. And some of you guys here today, you've been in that process walking with God for a while as well. That invitation started with me in the summer of 1993. I remember it very clearly. I was in my early 20s, and I was just realizing that everything in my life just seemed to hit a dead end. And maybe if you're with us today, you might be at that spot. Maybe that's why you came and you visited in one of our locations today, because you're searching. You're thinking, there's got to be something more. I keep hitting these dead ends, and there's got to be something bigger at work here. And that's where I was in my early 20s. And I remember very clearly, I went to this church, and what was really cool about this church is they didn't care that I pulled up and I had like a righteous mullet, y'all. I did not fit the church crowd. They didn't care about that. They didn't care that I rode my motorcycle literally up onto the sidewalk by the front door of the church, and I parked it, and I walked inside, and I had a bright orange t-shirt on that advertised an alcoholic beverage, and these people at this church, it must have blown their mind, but they were so gracious. They were so cool, and they extended to me just love and kindness and concern, and that got my attention. And maybe if you're in one of our rooms today, that's where you are. You come and you're like, okay, well, surely this building's going to fall down if I walk here in it. And I assure you, it is not. Our campuses are safe places for you to come and experience Jesus and process it and learn to do life together with other people. And so if we can help you in any way begin that journey, extend that invitation to you today, we would absolutely love that if you would talk to us at the close of our gatherings today, or you can go to fill out the Connect card online. We would absolutely love that. Now, for me, as I began this walk with God, this is about 28 years ago, y'all, so it's been a while. I started having lunches with a guy who was one of the pastors at that church, and over the course of several weeks, he began to tell me about Jesus. He began to extend this invitation to me into something new. And it's been a beautiful, lifelong process for me to walk with God. And through it all, I've had so many incredible encounters. Some have been just terrific, and some have been absolutely horrible. But either way, they have formed me and they have shaped me. And through it all, God has been at work, shaping and forming, doing this work of formation that we're going to talk about today, because that's what he does. So today we find ourselves at another pivotal moment with Nicodemus. It's an encounter that he has, this time not with Jesus, this time with religious leaders, with other religious leaders, because remember we said he's a high-ranking religious official, so these are his peers. And they're standing in a circle and they're talking, and something really awkward happens. Before we get there, though, I want to kind of paint the picture of something similar that probably has happened in your lives as well. Have you ever been in a conversation maybe with a person or maybe a group of people where everybody's got a really unified, strong opinion about something. It couldn't be politics or it couldn't be religion or church, could it? Everybody's got a really strong opinion about something, and you're the only one in the room that maybe has a different perspective. Maybe you've got like a dissenting view. Maybe you've got just some other truth that you could offer, or you've just got another idea about the way things are. Y'all, this happens for me like at holidays, right? When I get together with my family, it seems like everybody's on the same page about certain things. And then I find myself in the room like I'm the only one that is like the odd man out thinking, okay, am I crazy? Because I don't see it. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've been in that situation. Maybe recently you did that at a 4th of July picnic and you gathered with friends or families or whatever it was, and you found yourself there. And so what do you do in that moment when the conversation is tense and everybody's got a strong opinion about it? Most of us, we're internally thinking, okay, what do I do? Because if I say something, they're going to pounce. And you've been there probably. And so if you're like me, like I tend to kind of throw out a question. Well, what about this? Or have you thought about this? Or I offer some other angle on the camera that we can kind of look at it through and just put a nugget out there. And y'all, it is like being a frog in a box with a snake, and all of a sudden everybody just turns and they pounce on you. And for me, I walk away from those moments often and I just start getting in my head. And I start overanalyzing and overthinking, thinking, man, I really messed that up. Golly, if I had to do that over again, I could have said this. I could have offered this truth, or I could have given them these facts that might have swayed them. I could have maybe brought a different opinion or a different perspective. If only I would have done that different. That was so far from perfect. Man, I just totally failed in that moment. Have you ever been there? Well, that's a similar situation to where we find Nicodemus today. In a moment just like that, with his peers, where everyone's got a pretty dominant opinion about something. Now, where we're going to be today is in John chapter 7. And what's happening here in this moment is there's something called the Feast of Tabernacles. And so the Feast of Tabernacles is one of 7, it's the final of 7 feasts that the nation of Israel is commanded to observe. And what they're doing is they're commemorating when God delivered them out of slavery, out of Egypt, when he rescued them. And so this festival in particular is supposed to be a very joyful time, a very celebratory time, and everybody is supposed to be having a great time, and the moment is just supposed to be wonderful. But the people who are putting on the party, the festival, the religious leaders, they're not feeling that at all. In fact, they are just, if you're from the South, you've heard this, they just eat up with it. They are just so upset with Jesus because he is doing things that are going against what they perceive is their law. He is breaking all kind of rules that they perceive, and they feel threatened by him. And so they've sent word with some temple guards that when or if they see Jesus teaching at this festival, that they're to arrest him, they're to bring him in for questioning. And so the guards do in fact see Jesus teaching, and they're enamored with him. And so, and Jesus, when he's done, he kind of slips away, and their head's kind of spinning, and so they miss their opportunity to grab him. Then they got to go report back to the religious leaders, Nicodemus among them, and that's where we find ourselves in John chapter 7. So if you would, let's look at this together. Finally, the temple guards went back to the chief priests and the Pharisees, who asked them, "Why didn't you bring him in?" "No one ever spoke the way that this man does," the guards replied. "You mean he deceived you also," the Pharisees retorted. "Have any of the rulers of the Pharisees believed in him?" "No." "But the mob knows nothing of the law. There's a curse on them." Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus earlier and was one of their own number, asked, "Does our law condemn a man without hearing him to find out what he's been doing?" They replied, "Are you from Galilee too? Look into it, and you'll find out that a prophet does not come out of Galilee." And then they all went home. That's really interesting. You can imagine the tension in this moment because they're out to get him. They're out to get Jesus. And Nicodemus, who had already going to meet with Jesus at nighttime, probably in secret. Nobody really knew about it. He's replaying the tape of his encounter that he had with Jesus. He's in a process. You can just sense that. And so he does what a lot of us would do. When he knows there's a dominant opinion about something, he just injects a question. And he just throws it out there. Verse 51, does our law condemn a man without first hearing him to find out what he's doing? Nicodemus, knowing he's been there, is probably processing like, do I say something? Do I tell them that I went and saw him? No, probably not. And so he puts that question out there about the law, the very thing that they feel like Jesus is breaking, and he questions them on it. And then you can see it. They just turn and pounce in verse 53. Are you from Galilee too? Look into it, and you'll find out that a prophet does not come out of Galilee. So they're questioning Nicodemus, saying, hey, what, are you from the same place? Are you from that area that's got a bad reputation, that's not so great? Are you from there too? And hey, by the way, don't you know your Bible? Don't you know that a prophet's not going to come out of there? So it's interesting that the same exact sarcasm, if you were with us last week, the same kind of tone of sarcasm that Nicodemus had with Jesus when he was questioning him about this idea of being born again. And he says, what, does that mean you're supposed to re-enter the mother's womb? Like, what does that mean? This same tone of sarcasm is now the same sarcasm that's being used on him. And as far as we know, that's the end of the conversation, right after they turned on him. It says, then they all went home. I'm trying to imagine how Nicodemus felt when he left that meeting. Well, let's just think about it for a second. Did he wonder, oh my goodness, like, is something starting to happen in me? Something's starting to change. Something's taking place. Like, these are my peers. I'm one of their leaders. And now all of a sudden, I've kind of thrown something out there that's almost going up against them. That's a pretty bold, brave move. And he's got to be wondering, like, should I have said more? Was there a better way that I could have asked the question? Was there some other information that I could have offered? Should I have told them that I went and met with them and I'm starting to understand like what Jesus is all about? What should I have done in that moment? If it were me, I would have probably left there. If I'd have had a meeting, y'all, with my peers, with my peers and my leaders, and they would have turned on me like that and questioned, I'd have started to question myself probably. I'd have felt the pressure. And more than likely would have walked away feeling like a failure, feeling that somehow I didn't execute that well, that somehow that moment was not perfect. It's not perfect. And what I want to invite us into today is to realize that in our journey, in our walk with God, and we use that term very specifically, walk with God, our mission is to reach people and to help them walk with God. It's a process. It's a walk. In that walk, every step matters. Every step matters in our walk with God. When you leave one of our rooms today to get to your vehicle, you're not just going to take one big jump and get there. It's going to be a walk. It's going to be comprised of steps. Maybe those steps are small, maybe they're huge, or you might be feeling really jazzed after you leave here today because you had that extra cup of coffee, and you may skip out to your car, and we won't make fun of you, I promise, if you do that. But either way, there are steps that are involved because it is a process. And when it comes to our walk with God, every step is a part of the formative process. And through it all, God is shaping and molding, and He's doing something, and every step matters. And the other thing, we have to remember that there really are no perfect moments. They just don't exist, y'all. There's our idea of perfection, but at the end of the day, there are no perfect circumstances, no perfect moments. It is time for us to let ourselves off the hook of that. Now, I don't know if there's any other recovering perfectionists that are around today. That's me. That's me. I'm recovering. And I am learning the discipline of realizing that every step matters and not every moment has to be perfect. And God has a unique and special way of reminding us of this. This happened to me recently. Like a lot of you, I absolutely love being on the water. It is my happy place. That's probably why many of you live in the areas that you live in right now, because you love being by the water. Well, I love being on the water. I spend a lot of time on the water. I spend a lot of time fishing. And it's one of my favorite things to do. And I get the opportunity to take people fishing a lot. And so recently, this past March, I was out kind of scouting around for an upcoming trip that I had, and there was this particular type of fish, striped bass, which some of you guys are familiar with that I was going to be targeting that day. Now, typically, I fish for those a lot in the summertime on topwater, for those of you who are fishermen, because it's a lot of fun. But this particular season, March, up in the Neuse River, they're kind of way up there, and they're in deeper water. And so I hadn't had a lot of experience like going for those fish in real deep water. And so I'd asked some of my fellow captain buddies and some other people who I really trusted, like, hey, give me your thoughts on how to do this best. And so I went out and I was by myself, looking in some deep holes for these fish using heavy jig heads and kind of bouncing it off the bottom. And man, almost immediately when I'd gotten to my first spot and scouted it out, I pulled a striper up on the boat. And matter of fact, here's a picture of it right here. And so I was so excited that this is working. I was so excited that my effort was paying off. And I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing. And so I quickly snapped this selfie and I sent it out to all of my other fellow fishermen friends. And I sent it to my family. I was like, look, it's working. And I was super, super pumped. And so then I quickly put the fish back in the water and I let it go. And then almost immediately, the text messages start coming in on my phone. Oh man, that's awesome. You must be so excited. That's rare. And I'm thinking, it's not really rare. Like, it's a striper. I mean, they're all around. And then my son was the one that really got my attention. Dad, $100, that's awesome. I was like, huh? I go back and I look at the picture and I blow it up on my phone. And I see this. Next picture. You see that red tag right there? So the North Carolina fisheries, they will tag these fish with 3 colors. Green, you clip that tag off and you mail it in, and they send you the information about that fish. And you get to see like how far it's traveled and how much it's grown and all of that. Yellow, they do the same thing, except now they send you $50. Red, they send you $100. Y'all. Here I am, a captain, and take people fishing, and I totally missed it. I was so embarrassed. So embarrassed. And I'm at this pivotal moment of, well, do I just play it off? Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I'll be waiting a long time for that $100. Or do I come clean and say, no, I totally missed it? And as hard and humiliating as it was, that's what I did. And boy, I was like a laughingstock for a little bit. People were teasing me, don't forget to check the fish, Danny. Man, I was in such a hurry to get the picture and send it out to everybody and let everybody know that I knew what I was doing, that I totally missed taking in the moment. And I totally missed something really important. My problem with that was that not just that I missed the $100 tag, but I missed the moment. I missed the moment. If you've been with us for a little bit, you've probably heard Mike say recently that the distance between encounter and expression appears to be shrinking. It appears to be shrinking. And if you want to see evidence of this, you can look on our social media platforms. The reason that I did this, the reason that we do this, is because we want the applause. Expression is what gets the applause. It's what gets the likes. And that fuels something inside of us. So we immediately go to that. And in the process of going to that, what we wind up doing when we skip over the formative process is we settle for a shallow faith. when we skip over the formative process, we wind up settling for a much shallower faith. Now, maybe some of you guys in the room or in one of our rooms today or watching online are familiar with the Enneagram. Now, it's a really neat resource, a neat tool. It's pretty spot on, but it's just that. It's a tool. It's not the end-all, be-all. It shouldn't define you. The only thing that should do that should be Jesus. And all 9 of those personality types, Jesus embodied. But it is really interesting to see what our natural bents are. And for me, I'm a 7, and there may be some other 7s who are with us today. And so with 7s, what they tend to do is they tend to skip over the formative process. It's kind of a natural thing. Like they want to get everything they can out of life, and then they love sharing that and being excited about it, but they don't like lingering here in this middle part. They don't like feeling any kind of uncomfortableness. They don't like feeling any kind of pain. They don't like stopping and slowing down and really being attentive and paying attention to the details. We just want all the encounters, and we want to tell everybody about them. And so that's my natural bent, and I know that about myself. So this past year, for my one word, I chose a word that I knew was going to really challenge that. My word is dwell. And for a 7, y'all, that is a tough word. And the impetus for the word was because I realized that I needed to slow down because I was missing some significant moments and being able to take them all in. And so it's got kind of a twofold thing. One is just to remember that as a follower of Jesus, I have the Holy Spirit who dwells, who literally sets up camp inside of me and is with me. And then the second aspect of that is that when I am going through situations that I am wanting to quickly get out of, I have to remember that God is dwelling inside of me. He's given me everything I need to be able to stay in that moment and actually dwell there for a while to see what it is that God is trying to do. What's he trying to do? So when you and I shortcut that process of formation, just like with the fish, there's a cost. My cost was $100, but there's a much greater cost for you and I. When we shortcut the process of formation, the cost is that we are unable to bear the weight of our life. We're unable to bear the weight of our life. Another way to look at it is, if you know anything at all about buildings, you know that the foundation is the most important part of the whole thing. And y'all, if the foundation is off, if the corners aren't square, if the foundation's not level, if the right mixture is not used, then it cannot support the weight of the structure that you build upon it. Formation for us is the foundation of our life. And when we are in that, God is doing something significant so that you and I can bear everything that life gives us. And when we eliminate that, some things happen. When we try to rush through it, some things happen. When we shortcut the process of formation, it doesn't turn out good for us. If you've been with us for a little bit, you've heard us also talk about this idea that the mark of somebody who is growing in their faith, Mike says, is stability, gratitude, and generosity. Stability, gratitude, and generosity. And when we shortcut that process of formation, our stability is affected. The thing that allows us to bear the weight of all of life's events and circumstances, that foundation, the stability of it is affected. And the way to know, is this something that I'm struggling with? Does my stability need some work, need some help? Is to ask yourself some questions. Like, do you find yourself easily frustrated or easily annoyed with things that maybe shouldn't really bug you? Do you find yourself shorter fused or less tolerant of things? Do you react really big in moments and everybody's going, man, that reaction did not really equal what just happened? If you answer yes to any of those questions, there's probably some work that needs to be done in that formative process of working on stability. The other thing when we shortcut the process of formation is our ability to experience grace is hindered to experience grace, to give grace, to receive grace. That's affected, it's hindered when we shortcut that process of formation. And if you want to know if this is a struggle for you, think about your relationships. Do people just automatically just kind of get under your skin? Do you have less patience with people that do things that bug you or aren't maybe exactly the way that you think that they should do them? Are you less tolerant of people who have differing opinions about things or different ideologies? How's your ability to experience grace, to give and to receive grace? The Apostle Paul talks about this in Colossians chapter 3. It's a really beautiful picture. He says that we're to make room, make allowance for one another's faults. And we do this, he says, by clothing ourselves with kindness and humility and mercy and all of those things that come from spending time with the Lord and sitting in those pivotal moments of formation. When we do that, we begin to experience the receiving of grace, which allows us to be able to give it to others as well. So what do we do? What do we do? We've got to learn to sit in the discomfort and not try to rush through it. I want you just to let that statement sit for just a minute. We've got to learn to sit in the discomfort and not try to rush through it. Not try to expect that everybody should be perfect, that moments should be perfect, that we're going to get it right all the time, that bad things and uncomfortable things are not going to happen to us because they are. It's just all part of life. But when they do, instead of trying to escape from it, we've got to learn to resist that temptation and to sit in those moments and ask the question, God, what is it that you're doing here? Because God, you know my temptation right now is to rush through this. My temptation is to ignore it, to bury it, to be distracted from it, to shut down, pretend like it doesn't exist, whatever it is. We've got to learn to resist that temptation and instead embrace it, open up our hands and go, God, what is it that you're trying to do right now? Because, Lord, it's uncomfortable, it is painful, it's awkward, it's embarrassing, but I know you're doing something. What is it in this moment that you are doing, that you are trying to teach me? Three questions you can ask yourself. The first one is this, for some reflection today, maybe your family, your friends, or somebody you trust who you know is going to go 100% with you. To ask them what they see. Where do you find yourself frustrated? Where do you find yourself frustrated with your failures? Where do you find yourself frustrated in life? Where do you find yourself frustrated with other people? Where do you find yourself frustrated that things aren't working out the way they should and that they're not perfect? Where do you find yourself frustrated? Secondly, what might God be attempting to teach you in that struggle? Lord, what are you trying to teach me? What is it that you're doing? Because God, I know you're doing something. What is it that you're doing? And third, what would it look like for you to stay in the formation process by experiencing grace, giving, receiving, extending a measure to yourself and to other people? How would grace play into that moment to give you what you need to dwell, to sit in the process? The other night, I heard Pastor Levi Lusko say something that I thought was really insightful. He said, you and I want the product of faith more than we want the process of faith. And y'all, Jesus invites us into a process. It's like Mike said last week. He's not giving us a golden ticket. It's not a product. It is a lifelong journey, a lifelong process. The Apostle Paul says that we are continually working out our salvation. It's a lifelong process. And when we are expecting it to be something immediate, and when we don't like what it is and we skip over and we rush over because we're looking for a product, we miss the very essence of what it is that God is trying to do to shape and form us and make us more like Him and do something new inside of us. Maybe today God is asking you, inviting you to consider that there's something that you need to sit with. A moment that perhaps you shouldn't rush out of. Or maybe as you look back and you reflect and you're thinking about kind of where you are and why you are the way you are, you realize that maybe there's something that you skipped over, something significant in the formative process that you didn't let yourself feel and experience and deal with. And maybe God's just saying, look, you need to go back and surrender that to me and give that to me and let me take you back and show you what it is that I was trying to do in that. God is inviting us today. He's extending to us an invitation to consider that every step in our walk with Him is a part of the formative process. It's a part of the process. It's not a product. It's a lifelong process that is continually giving us new life, new mercies, new grace, a new beginning. Whatever that may be for you today, we're going to pray. And I just want you to invite you to just open up your hands and say, Lord, what is it that you have for me today? Where am I shortcutting this in my own life? And what is it that you're trying to teach me? Would you join me? Lord, I recognize my temptation and my own struggle to expect moments to be perfect, to beat myself and get mad when things aren't going the way that they're supposed to go, Lord. And I confess to you my temptation to skip over the uncomfortable portions of life. Now, Lord, I ask that you will help me, help others, my friends here today who maybe have that same temptation to learn to sit with and learn to dwell with you and discover what it is that you're doing and shaping and forming, God, the formative work that you're doing in our life through the process of formation. Lord, help us as your people to be more open to that. Father, there are people in the room today who are in all kinds of different situations and seasons of life, Lord, and we understand that the spectrum is massive in where people are. But God, I pray that you will just meet us in the moments and the seasons that we are in. God, and that you will just gently continue to speak to us and remind us of who you are, the new life that is available. God, and that you would draw us nearer and closer unto you. It is in the name of your Son, Jesus, we pray.